A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, Book the Second, The Golden Thread, Chapter 7, Monsieur the Marquis in Town. Monseigneur, one of the great lords of power in the court, held his fortnightly reception in his grand hotel in Paris. Monseigneur was in his inner room, his sanctuary of sanctuaries, the holiest of holies. To the crowd of worshippers in the suite of rooms without, Monseigneur was about to take his chocolate. Monseigneur could swallow a great many things with ease, and was, by some few sullen minds, supposed to be rather rapidly swallowing France. But his morning's chocolate could not so much as get into the throat of Monseigneur without the aid of 4 strong men besides the cook. Yes, it took 4 men, all 4 ablaze with gorgeous decoration, and the chief of them, unable to exist with fewer than 2 gold watches in his pocket, emulative of the noble and chaste fashion set by Monseigneur, to conduct the happy chocolate to Monseigneur's lips. One lacquerly carried the chocolate pot into the sacred presence. A second milled and frothed the chocolate with the little instrument he bore for that function. A third presented the favorite napkin. A fourth, he of the 2 gold watches, poured the chocolate out. It was impossible for Monseigneur to dispense with one of these attendants on the chocolate and hold his high place under the admiring heavens. Deep would have been the blot upon his escutcheon if his chocolate had been ignobly waited on him by only 3 men. He must have died of 2. Monseigneur had been out at a little supper last night, where the comedy and the grand opera were charmingly represented. Monseigneur was out at a little supper most nights with fascinating company. So polite and so impressible was Monseigneur that the comedy and the grand opera had far more influence with him in the tiresome articles of state affairs and state secrets than the needs of all France. A happy circumstance for France, as the like always is for all countries similarly favored, always was for England, by way of example, in the regretted days of the Mary Stuart who sold it. Monseigneur had one truly noble idea of general public business, which was to let everything go on in its own way of particular public business. Monseigneur had the other truly noble idea that it must all go his way, tend to his own power and pocket. Of his pleasures, general and particular, Monseigneur had the other truly noble idea that the world was made for them. The text of his order, altered from the original by only a pronoun, which is not much, ran, "The earth and the fullness thereof are mine, saith Monseigneur." Yet Monseigneur had slowly found that vulgar embarrassments crept into his affairs, both private and public, and he had, as to both classes of affairs, allied himself perforce with a farmer general as to finances public, because Monseigneur could not make anything at all of them, and must consequently let them out to somebody who could. As to finances private, because farmer generals were rich, and Monseigneur, after generations of great luxury and expense, was growing poor. Hence Monseigneur had taken his sister from a convent, while there was yet time to ward off the impending veil, the cheapest garment she could wear, and had bestowed her as a prize upon a very rich farmer general, poor in family, which farmer general, carrying an appropriate cane with a golden apple on the top of it, was now among the company in the outer rooms, much prostrated before all mankind, always expecting superior mankind of the blood of Monseigneur, who, his own wife included, looked down upon him with the loftiest contempt. A sumptuous man was the farmer general. 30 horses stood in his stables. 24 male domestics sat in his halls. 6 body women waited on his wife, as one who pretended to do nothing but plunder and forage where he could. The farmer general, howsoever his matrimonial relations conducted to social morality, was at least the greatest reality was at least the greatest reality among the personages who attended at the hotel of Monsignor that day. For the rooms, though a beautiful scene to look at, and adorned with every device of decoration that the taste and skill of the time could achieve, were in truth not a sound business considered with any reference to the scarecrows in the rags and nightcaps elsewhere, and not so far off either, but that the watching towers of Notre Dame, almost equidistant from the two extremes, could see them both. They would have been an exceedingly uncomfortable business, if that could have been anybody's business, at the house of Monsignor. Military officers destitute of military knowledge, naval officers with no idea of a ship, civil officers without a notion of affairs, brazen ecclesiastics of the worst worldly, with sensual eyes, loose tongues, and looser lives, all totally unfit for their several callings, all lying horribly in pretending to belong to them, but all nearly or remotely of the order of Monsignor, and therefore foisted on all public employments from which anything was to be got. These were to be told off by the score and the score, people not immediately connected with Monsignor or the state, yet equally unconnected with anything that was real, or with lives passed in travelling by any straight road or any true earthly end, were no less abundant. Doctors who made great fortunes out of dainty remedies for imaginary disorders that never existed smiled upon their courtly patients in the antechambers of Monsignor. Projectors who had discovered every kind of remedy for the little evils with which the state was touched, except the remedy of setting to work in earnest to root out a single sin, poured their distracting babble into any ears they could lay hold of at the reception of Monsignor. Unbelieving philosophers, who were remodeling the world with words, and making card towers of Babel to scale the skies with, talked with unbelieving chemists, who had an eye on the transmutation of metals, at this wonderful gathering, accumulated by Monsignor, exquisite gentlemen of the finest breeding, which was at that remarkable time, and has been since, to be known, by its fruits of indifference to every natural subject of human interest, were in the most exemplary state of exhaustion at the hotel of Monsignor. Such homes had these various notabilities left behind them in the fine world of Paris, that the spies among the assembled devotees of Monsignor, forming a goodly half of the polite company, would have found it hard to discover among the angels of that sphere one solitary wife who in her manners and appearance owned it to being a mother. Indeed, except for the mere act of bringing a troublesome creature into this world, which does not go far toward the realization of the name of mother, there was no such thing known to the fashion. Peasant women kept the unfashionable babies close and brought them up, and charming grandmammas of 60 dressed and supped as at 20. The leprosy of unreality disfigured every human creature in attendance upon Monsignor. In the outermost room were half a dozen exceptional people who had had for a few years some vague misgiving in them that things in general were going rather wrong, as a promising way of setting them right. Half of the half-dozen had become members of a fantastic sect of convulsionists, and were even then considering within themselves whether they should form, rage, roar, and turn cataleptic on the spot, thereby setting up a highly intelligible finger-post to the future for Monsignor's guidance. Beside these dervishes were other three who had rushed into another sect, which mended manners with a jargon about the center of truth, holding that man had got out of the center of truth, which did not need much demonstration, but had not got out of the circumference, and that he was to be kept from flying out of the circumference, and was even to be shoved back into the center by fasting and seeing of spirits, Among these accordingly much discoursing with spirits went on, and it did a world of good, which never became manifest. But the comfort was that all the company at the grand hotel of Monsignor were perfectly dressed. If the day of judgment had only been ascertained to be a dress day, everybody there would have been eternally correct. Such fizzling and powdering and sticking up of hair, such delicate complexions artificially preserved and mended, such gallant swords to look at, and such delicate honor to the sense of smell, would surely keep anything going for ever and ever. The exquisite gentlemen of the finest breeding wore little pendant trinkets that clinked as they languidly moved. These golden fetters rang like precious little bells, and what with that ringing, and with the rustle of silk and brocade and fine linen, there was a flutter in the air that fanned Saint Antoine and his devouring hunger far away. And there we will pause.